It's hard to believe that 9/11 is 20 years in America's rearview mirror. I mean, we all have our story of where we were when the news broke. It's hard to forget those images, turning on the TV and just being completely jaw-dropped by the devastation. We'd never seen anything like this in the US before. It was just gut-wrenching.
So that's this empty space there, that's where the towers used to be.
At the time, I was working with ABC 7 News in Los Angeles, and about a year after 9/11, we traveled to New York to tell some stories for the one-year anniversary. And we profiled about 10 different people, firefighters, paramedics, a young medical student, and people who were in the towers who escaped with their lives. We wanted to hear their take. And ever since, I've just always had this curiosity, what happened to these great people that we met in August of 2002? So on the 20th anniversary, I made a commitment. I want to track down as many people as I could and see what they're doing today, see how that historic day changed the course of their professional and personal life.
You know, even though there were many people running out of Lower Manhattan at that point, I thought, if this is going to be my last episode, this is how I want it to be. I want to be helping other people.
First up is Dr. Dirk Stanley. At the time, he was just a third-year medical student, but he knew where he was needed. He had to leave that hospital in Brooklyn and make his way into Manhattan to help.
Dirk Stanley knew that he could help. He just didn't know how. The third-year medical student was doing a rotation at Brooklyn Hospital Center when news of the attacks hit.
So Brooklyn is down that way, and we crossed over the bridge and came down to Fulton Street when we walked over towards the World Trade Center, and we couldn't see anything at that point because the smoke had become so thick and there were papers all over and ashes that were up to our knees.
Stanley continued walking, trying to make sense out of the chaos. He came up to a group of volunteers who were standing around. Nobody knew really what to do.
But I started barking out orders and people started listening to me. We had the ambulances lined up over here. So the first thing I did is said, I need all the ambulance drivers to meet over here. I want all the ambulance drivers to keep your keys in the ignition, turn your motors off so we don't have any dead batteries, and wait at the ambulances for further instruction. I need all EMTs and paramedics to assemble over here. You guys are going to be our first line of triage. As patients start arriving, you're going to look at them. If there's anything bleeding, put a finger on it, and bring them over here where they're going to be seen by doctors and nurses.
It was chaotic, frenetic, and frightening.
The World Trade Center has just fallen. We don't know how many casualties there are, but we have to prepare for treating lots of people.
Stanley doesn't know why, but something in him realized at that moment he had to do something fast.
I started delegating, and eventually, all of a sudden, I was in charge of the operations at the triage center, which is a very strange position to be put in as a third-year medical student.
Soon he was joined by many more surgeons, psychiatrists, ER nurses, all taking the direction of a third-year medical student. The triage unit was separated into different groups: critical, non-critical, and the walking wounded.
We couldn't see anything. There was so much smoke and so much ash. We were actually almost up to our knees in the ash, and there were papers flying around and shoes. I didn't know what to think of the shoes. There were lots of shoes lying out in the street, so people were just taking off their shoes so that they could run faster. So you're seeing all these pieces of evidence of complete chaos and turmoil and terror.
Check for bruises and internal shock.
They treated cardiac patients, people who had had trouble breathing, people who were exhausted, like firefighters.
There was so much smoke that they were constantly cycling back and forth. They would come up here for a little while, eat something quick, get their eyes washed out. We'd make sure that they were okay, and then they would go right down to ground zero again.
Hey!
Among the volunteers, Richard Gins, a social worker. He jumped in, joined Dirk, and began doing what he does best: crisis counseling.
We all pulled together and realized that we had to let people tell their story. That's the first thing they were going to need, is not give them direction, but give them opportunity to just talk about their pain.
Interesting year, huh?
Definitely.
Amid all the horror, Stanley and others learned a lot about reliance.
I have to say that day, I think I saw absolute beautiful things.
Oh my God, this is so terrible.
Sometimes there were people crying about everything that was going on, and immediately there were 10 people rushing up to help that person. And being able to see that and experience that, that was really very comforting to me to see what we're capable of as people to do in a time of stress.
Oh my gosh, stepping into the time machine. Welcome back, Dr. Dirk Stanley.
Hi, thank you. Thank you.
Good
to see you after all this time, right?
It's been, believe it or not, in 2 days from today, it will have been exactly 19 years since we first met on the mean streets of New York, where you walked us through what was going on September 11th, 2001. But to the day, we shot that interview on August 24th, 2002.
Wow. It seems like yesterday.
And this is St. Paul's, where the bells were ringing, and it was actually sort of surreal hearing the bells as we're trying to find our way.
So 2 decades later, Dr. Dirk, what are your thoughts after watching that?
I can't believe it seems like just yesterday, and I look so young there. I was just, fresh in my last year of medical school. And even though there were a lot of people running out of southern Manhattan that day, there were also people running in to help. And that, to me, still strikes me to this day as one of the miraculous things that that even in a time of crisis like this, that there are people who run in and put themselves at risk to help other people.
Take us back and describe those moments. You see the news, you're at the hospital, news breaks, you're glued to the TV. What lights the fuse in you to say, I have to get out of here and go knee deep and help people?
Well, so that day, it took me by surprise, like it took everyone by surprise. We had just finished our morning report I was doing my pediatric rotation, and all of a sudden somebody came in and said, I heard that like an air conditioner might have blown up at the World Trade Center. Like, we have to go look out the window. And by the time we went and looked out the window, there was only one tower standing. And just as we were watching it, all of a sudden that tower fell, and there was nothing but smoke and ash everywhere. And I had a very good friend who did survive the 9/11, but he just started working in the World Trade Center. And I thought, I had the suspension of belief that he might have just been in the tower that fell in front of it. It was so unthinkable. So I went down into the emergency room of our hospital, and it's a little hard as a medical student because you don't really have a clear assigned role. You're there to learn, but in a crisis situation like this, nobody is there to teach you. So since I had scrubs, I had EMS training, and I didn't have a clear role in the hospital, and I really had the full suspension of belief that my friend had just died. I figured somebody's going to have to help. So I walked from Brooklyn Hospital across the Manhattan Bridge and, down to Fulton Street and went to try to help. But it got to the point where we couldn't even see. There was so much smoke and so much fire. And all we could see is it looked almost like if you've ever seen somebody blowing glass and, that type of really intense fire. We got to that point and we said, it's probably not safe to be here anymore. I didn't really know what we would encounter. People had the sense that an airplane had crashed into the towers, but other people at the site thought, well, is there more? Is there a bomb in there? Maybe there's an atom bomb. Maybe there's nerve gas. And so a lot of people were leaving the area, understandably, but once it got to the point where we couldn't see and really couldn't breathe anymore, then it was very clear, definitely we need to get out of there. And that's how I ended up on Greenwich Street.
So here you are, you're a third-year medical student. You've assumed kind of a monumental role in that moment. And then, kind of out of the smoke, possibly a familiar face arrives. Talk to us about the celebrity that showed up to lend a helping hand that day.
So the actor Matthew Modine, who I think lived near the area, suddenly arrived and offered to help at our triage site. And if you're not a medical professional, you might not appreciate that he was in two very influential medical films, playing doctors and epidemiologists, when you need somebody to try to help keep other medical people at your triage site. Because, that day people were very antsy. They were, where are the patients? Like, I'm a surgeon. I need to, I'm looking for the patients. Where am I supposed to go? So it was helpful to have somebody of his stature there to help keep the medical people at our site and keep them interested and engaged. He was a fantastic help that day and very gracious to all of us there.
Have you kept in touch over the years?
He's part of the group. We keep in touch with him too. So yeah, we all met that day through a lot of chaos, but we still stay in touch.
Zooming out to the impact, that moment 20 years later, I'm sure it left its thumbprint not only personally but professionally. And let's break that up. So first off, how did 9/11, that moment when you're in the thick of things at ground zero, possibly influence your professional career?
So it was really an unbelievable baptism by fire, if you will, of leadership. That is, if there's anything that speaks to staying calm, focusing on the issues, providing guidance, making important decisions quickly. It's not a training I would recommend, but it certainly helped me understand how team dynamics work and crisis situations, how to keep people engaged and calm and working together in a crisis situation. That's what I learned from that day.
And how about personally? How did it affect you? Kind of at your core?
I have mixed feelings about it. That day, I saw such beautiful humanity of people racing up to help each other, but at the same time, the worst of humanity. 2 massive towers and the people inside them all came crashing down. And I guess I'm still sort of conflicted. Why does it take a crisis like that to see the best of humanity? It is reassuring to know that just below the surface of all of our arguments and disagreements that we might have, that we actually do care about each other. I watched one woman come out and say, I have this apartment over here. If anyone needs a room to sleep, come to me, I have the keys. Or, food vendors were coming out and just giving out food for free. And, people, if somebody was crying on the street, random strangers were coming up and just hugging them and knowing that we can do that. We can be that awesome to each other is very, very comforting and reassuring. I just wish it didn't take a major crisis for that to happen.
This is a tough one because unless you're able to tap into an alternate reality, it's hard to think about this. But have you ever thought through the years, what would have happened if I wouldn't have rushed into the city while everyone was rushing out?
I think it helped me to better understand who I am as a physician. I am the person who will, often put the needs of others ahead of my own needs, and nothing really in my career has quite spoken to it the way that day did. I think that pattern certainly reoccurred throughout my career, but if there's one demonstrable incident where it that's really speaks loud and clear, I think it was 9/11.
Is there anything that we missed or you feel on these anniversaries that people don't talk about and you wish they did?
I guess if there's anything that I would want other people to know about, it's that the first responders who were there that day, the police, fire, EMS, and other first responders really sacrificed to help in a crisis situation. A lot of people have developed medical issues. A lot of people still, I think, have PTSD or other psychiatric issues related to it. There's a lot of sort of quiet, unspoken pain still from that day that I think still need attention and support from the medical community. I think that's one of the reasons why maybe I document it, just to keep it alive, that we remember that day. To me, really, the big lesson from that day was that we are awesome. We can do awesome things when we work together. And that's the memory that I would like to pass on. That there is a lot of compassion and a lot of love just walking around in front of us, and we don't see it because there's not the need to show it. But when there's a crisis, people will show it, and it's really awesome.
Dr. Dirk, thank you again for sharing, and thank you for keeping this really pivotal moment in our history alive with your story.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. It's a genuine pleasure speaking with you about this, and thank you for remembering it on such a big milestone.